The observation deck of Outpost 7 stood silent except for the howling wind that rattled the reinforced windows. Commander Thalera of the Corinthian Empire pressed her scaled palm against the frosted glass, her yellow eyes tracking the small silver dot that tumbled through the purple sky of Glacius 7. The ion storm had appeared without warning, as they always did on this cursed ice moon. Lightning crackled in shades of violet and blue, each bolt powerful enough to fry every circuit in a standard vessel. The silver dot was her son's ship. Caraval had taken the scout craft without permission again. He was trying to prove himself worthy, trying to show the other young Corinthians that he deserved his place despite being the commander's offspring. The irony burned in her chest. Now his ambition would kill him. "Commander, the electromagnetic interference is too severe for rescue operations." Her second officer spoke from behind her, his voice flat and professional. "Our shuttles cannot navigate the storm. The magnetic fields will tear them apart." Thalera did not turn around. She could not let them see her face right now. In Corinthian culture, emotion was weakness. Compassion was a flaw that evolution should have eliminated. A good commander calculated losses and moved forward. A good mother raised strong offspring who survived on their own merit. She had been taught these truths since hatching. But that was her child falling from the sky. The scout ship hit the ice plains 3 kilometers from the outpost. The impact sent a plume of frozen methane into the air. Thalera's internal display showed her the ship's status through her neural link. Hull breach in 3 sections. Life support failing. External temperature dropping rapidly. Caraval was still alive, but his body temperature was falling. Corinthians were reptilian. They could not generate their own heat like mammals. In the brutal cold of Glacius 7, exposed to temperatures that could freeze nitrogen solid, he had less than 2 hours. "Seal the outpost," Thalera commanded. "The storm will reach us in 40 minutes. All personnel to sheltered positions." "And the crashed vessel, Commander?" "There is nothing we can do." The words tasted like poison. "Seal the outpost." Her officers left without question. They understood. This was the Corinthian way. The strong survived. The weak perished. Sentiment clouded judgment and got more people killed. It was logical. It was correct. It was the only way their species had survived a hostile galaxy. Thalera remained at the window watching the storm approach. She was still calculating. Caraval's vital signs flickered in her vision. His heart rate was slowing. Soon he would slip into hibernation, his body's last defense against the cold. But hibernation required energy reserves and he was young. He would not last long. Across the frozen expanse, at the human terraforming colony 5 kilometers away, someone else was watching. Claire Morton stood in the equipment bay of the human settlement, staring at the crash site through her binoculars. She had been outside checking the thermal generators when the Corinthian scout ship fell from the sky. She had seen the whole thing. The way the small craft had tumbled, powerless against the storm. The brutal impact against the ice. The emergency beacon that started transmitting immediately after. "That's not our problem, Claire." Her supervisor stepped into the bay, his arms crossed. "That's a Corinthian vessel. We have strict protocols about interfering with their affairs." Claire lowered the binoculars. "There's someone alive in there." "Probably. But getting involved could violate the treaty. You know how the Corinthians are about accepting help. They see it as an insult. We could start a diplomatic incident." "A diplomatic incident." Claire repeated the words slowly. She looked back toward the crash site. The ion storm was building, lightning now striking the ice every few seconds. The temperature would drop another 100 degrees in the next hour. Someone is going to die out there. "That's not our responsibility." Claire walked to the emergency rescue locker. She began pulling out thermal suits, oxygen tanks, cutting equipment. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Her supervisor watched in growing alarm. "Claire, I'm ordering you to stop. If you take that equipment out there, you're on your own. The company won't back you up. You could lose your job. Hell, you could lose your life." "Yeah." Claire pulled on the thermal suit. It was designed for human physiology, capable of maintaining core temperature even in Glacius 7's worst conditions. Humans had evolved on a death world. They were good at surviving hostile environments. "I could." "Why would you risk everything for a Corinthian? They wouldn't do the same for you." Claire paused. Her hands stilled on the suit seals. For a moment she was somewhere else. A different planet. A different emergency. A child's voice calling for help that came too late. She had been too far away that day. She had followed protocol that day. She had done everything right and her son had died anyway. Because I can't watch another kid die when I could have done something. She finished sealing the suit and grabbed the cutting torch. "Log it however you want. I'm going." The supervisor stepped aside. He did not try to stop her again. Maybe he understood. Maybe he just knew it would not matter. Claire Morton had made her decision. She loaded the equipment onto a small tracked vehicle and drove toward the storm. The wind hit her immediately, rocking the vehicle. Ice crystals peppered the windshield. The ion storm was building faster than predicted. Lightning struck close enough that her hair stood on end inside the suit. The electromagnetic pulse made her instruments flicker and die. Back at the Corinthian outpost, Commander Thalera saw the human vehicle leaving the colony. She zoomed her enhanced vision and identified the driver. Claire Morton, junior terraforming engineer. 43 years old. No significant diplomatic or military training. Why would this human risk the storm? Thalera watched as the small vehicle pushed through the wind toward her son's crash site. The human was alone. No backup. No support from her colony. Just one person driving into a lethal storm to reach a crashed alien ship. For the first time in her life, Commander Thalera did not understand what she was seeing. The action made no logical sense. There was no benefit to this human. No profit. No strategic advantage. Only risk. The storm swallowed the vehicle from view. Thalera's claws scraped against the window. Her son was dying out there in the cold and dark. And a stranger was trying to save him. The storm hit with full force as Claire drove deeper into the ice plains. The wind screamed against the vehicle's hull, pushing it sideways across the frozen surface. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Her instruments were dead, fried by electromagnetic pulses. She navigated by instinct and memory, following the last bearing she had seen before the equipment failed. The cold seeped through even the advanced thermal suit. Not enough to threaten her life, not yet, but enough to remind her that this moon did not want humans here. Glacius 7 was a world of ice and death, where temperatures could freeze a person solid in minutes. But humans had evolved on Earth, a planet of extremes. They had survived ice ages and deserts, mountains and oceans. They were persistence hunters, creatures who refused to quit even when everything told them to stop. Claire's ancestors had chased prey for days across African plains until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. That same stubborn refusal to give up lived in her blood. She would reach that ship. She would get the child out. Everything else was just obstacles. The crashed vessel appeared through the storm like a ghost. It had carved a long trench in the ice, coming to rest against a ridge of frozen methane. The hull was coated in frost, and ice had already begun forming over the breach points. Claire brought her vehicle alongside and climbed out into the full fury of the storm. The wind nearly knocked her down immediately. She grabbed the vehicle's side and pulled herself forward, fighting for every step. Her thermal suit registered the external temperature at -200 degrees. The cold was so intense it felt like knives against any exposed skin. But the suit held. Human engineering, designed by a species that understood survival. She reached the ship and pressed her gloved hand against the hull. The metal was frozen solid, colder than anything natural. The emergency beacon pulsed weakly near what had been the cockpit. Claire pulled out her scanning device. It flickered, struggled against the electromagnetic interference, then gave her a basic reading. One life sign. Weak but present. The child was still alive. But the ship was sealed tight. The crash had welded the hatches shut with ice and twisted metal. The normal cutting tools she brought would take too long, if they worked at all in these conditions. Claire looked at the thermal lance strapped to her equipment pack. It was a dangerous tool even in controlled environments. Out here, in a storm, cutting into a pressurized vessel, it could easily cause catastrophic failure. One wrong angle and she could breach a fuel line or damage the life support completely. She had no choice. She set up the lance and began cutting. Inside the Corinthian outpost, Commander Thalera watched her son's vital signs continue to drop. His body temperature had fallen to dangerous levels. Soon his organs would begin shutting down. The hibernation response would trigger, but without proper conditions, it would only delay death, not prevent it. The human was at the ship now. Thalera could see her through the remote sensors, fighting the storm, setting up some kind of cutting equipment. What was this creature doing? Why was she risking everything? Thalera's training told her to remain silent, to observe, to maintain the proper distance between species. The Corinthians did not ask for help. They did not show weakness. They certainly did not beg aliens for assistance. But that was her son dying in that ship. Her claws moved across the communication panel before her conscious mind made the decision. She opened a direct channel to the human's suit. It was a violation of protocol. It would be reported. She would face questions from her superiors. None of that mattered. Human. Her voice came out harsh, and used to speaking the common trade language with any emotion. This is Commander Thalera of the Corinthian outpost. You are attempting to breach the crashed vessel. There was a pause. The human stopped moving. Then her voice came back, slightly distorted by the storm interference. That's right. There's someone alive in there. My offspring. Caraval. The words felt strange to say aloud. Corinthians did not speak of family bonds to outsiders. He is dying. Another pause. I'm going to get him out. The thermal lance you are using. You must cut at precise points or you will breach the fuel containment. This will cause an explosion. Thalera brought up the ship's schematics on her display. She had designed this vessel herself. She knew every centimeter of its structure. I am sending you the technical specifications. Cut along the marked lines only. The data transfer took longer than it should have. The storm was interfering with everything. But finally the human acknowledged receipt. Got it? Thank you. Thank you. Such a strange concept. Gratitude for information that should have been freely shared in any emergency. But Corinthian culture did not work that way. Thalera was breaking every rule she had been taught. Claire studied the schematics on her suit's small display. The Corinthian commander was right. One wrong cut and the whole ship could go up. But the marked lines showed her exactly where to work. It would still be dangerous, but now she had a chance. She adjusted the thermal lance and began cutting along the first line. The tool burned through the frozen metal slowly, creating a glowing seam in the darkness. Steam and gas vented from the cut, instantly freezing into crystals that the wind scattered. Claire worked with steady precision, following the pattern the alien commander had given her. Minutes passed. Each cut took all her concentration. The storm battered her, trying to throw off her aim. Her muscles burned from fighting the wind, from holding the lance steady. Her fingers were going numb despite the suit's heating elements. But she kept cutting. Humans were persistence hunters. They did not quit. The life support is failing faster than expected. The Corinthian commander's voice came through again. There was something different in it now. Something raw. Please. Please hurry. Please. A Corinthian was saying please to a human. Claire had been on Glacius 7 for 3 years. She had worked alongside the Corinthians at a distance. They were cold, formal, impossible to read. She had never heard one of them beg for anything. Almost there. Claire finished the third cut and started on the fourth. Just hold on. The final cut completed with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Claire grabbed the cutting torch and pried at the metal. It resisted, then suddenly gave way. A section of the hull came free, revealing the dark interior of the ship. Claire pointed her light inside and saw him. A young Corinthian, barely more than a child by their standards, curled in the pilot's seat. His scales were pale, almost white. His breathing was shallow. Ice had formed on his skin. I've got him. Claire climbed into the wreckage. I'm bringing him out now. Caraval was lighter than Claire expected, but still heavy enough to make the journey difficult. His body was cold, so cold that even through her gloves she could feel the chill radiating from his scales. His breathing was barely there, just the faintest movement of his chest. She had minutes, not hours. Claire made a quick decision. She stripped off the outer layer of her thermal suit, the most important heating component. Her body immediately protested as the brutal cold of Glacius 7 touched her inner layer. But she wrapped the young Corinthian in the warm material, bundling him as tightly as she could. The suit's heating elements would keep his core temperature from dropping further. It might keep him alive long enough. Okay, kid. We're going for a walk. She lifted him in her arms and climbed out of the wreckage. The wind hit her like a physical blow, so much worse without the outer suit layer. She could feel the cold trying to seep into her bones. Her body's core temperature would start dropping soon. She had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia became a serious problem. The vehicle was still there, covered in ice but intact. Claire loaded Caraval into the back section and tried to start the engine. It coughed, sputtered, then died. The electromagnetic storm had finally killed it. She tried 3 more times. Nothing. She looked back at the outpost, barely visible through the storm. 5 kilometers. In this wind, carrying the child, with her body temperature already dropping. It was going to be close. Claire pulled Caraval back out and secured him to her back using equipment straps. It was not elegant, but it worked. She began walking. Every step was a battle. The wind pushed her backward. Ice formed on her visor faster than the heaters could clear it. Her legs burned from the effort of pushing through snow and across slippery ice. Your mom is watching. Claire spoke into her suit's transmitter. She knew the Corinthian commander was still listening. Maybe talking would help her focus. Maybe it would help them both. She broke protocol to help me get you out. Did you know that? Corinthians don't ask for help. But she did. For you. Val did not respond. He was unconscious, his body trying desperately to conserve what little heat remained. Claire adjusted her grip and kept walking. I had a son once. His name was Tommy. He was about your age, I think. Hard to compare across species, but he had that same energy. Always trying to prove himself. Always pushing boundaries. Her breath came harder now. The cold was affecting her lungs. There was an accident. A reactor malfunction at a mining station. I was off-site, following safety protocols. By the time I got there, it was too late. The wind howled in response. Claire's legs were shaking now from cold and exhaustion. She had walked maybe 2 kilometers. 3 more to go. Her body temperature was dropping faster than she had hoped. Human endurance was remarkable, but even humans had limits. I followed the rules that day. Did everything right. And my son died. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving. So when I saw your ship crash, when I heard that beacon, I couldn't follow the rules again. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not again. Inside the Corinthian outpost, Commander Thalera stood motionless at the observation window. She was listening to every word the human said. Her officers had returned to their posts, confused by her behavior. She had opened a direct line to an alien. She had provided classified ship schematics. She had said please to a human. These were not things a Corinthian commander did. But now, listening to Claire Morton's story, something was happening inside Thalera that she had no name for. The human had lost a child. She carried that pain with her. And now she was risking her life to save a stranger's offspring because she could not bear to feel that pain again. This was not logical. This was not beneficial. This was pure emotional response, the kind of thing Corinthian training eliminated. It was weakness. But it did not feel like weakness. It felt like something else entirely. Your vital signs are dropping. Thalera spoke without thinking. You need to move faster. Claire's laugh came through the transmission, breathless and strained. Yeah, well, I'm working on it. Another stumble. She went down to one knee, caught herself with one hand. Just give me a second. You cannot stop. If you stop moving, you will freeze. I know. Claire forced herself back to her feet. Every muscle in her body was screaming. The cold was inside her now, making her movements sluggish. I know. She kept walking. One step. Another. Another. The outpost was closer now. She could see its lights through the storm like stars in the darkness. So close. Just a little further. Why are you doing this? Thalera's voice was different now. The formal tone was gone. She sounded lost. Why risk yourself for my offspring? We are nothing to each other. Our species barely tolerate each other's presence. Claire was quiet for a moment. Her breathing was ragged. Because he's a kid. Because his mom loves him. Because nobody should have to watch their child die when someone could help. She paused to catch her breath. That's all the reason I need. Thalera felt something crack inside her chest. It was not physical. It was deeper than that. Her entire worldview, everything she had been taught about strength and weakness, about proper behavior and emotional control, was shattering. This human was teaching her something that Corinthian culture had tried to eliminate. She was showing her compassion. You will make it, Thalera said, and was surprised to realize she meant it with every fiber of her being. You must make it. Working on it. Claire was less than half a kilometer from the outpost now. She could see Corinthians gathering at the entrance, watching. Probably confused about what was happening. Probably wondering why their commander was communicating with a human. Her legs gave out. She went down hard, catching herself on her hands. Caraval's weight pressed down on her back. She tried to stand. Her legs would not respond. The cold had taken too much. She was too exhausted. Get up. Thalera's voice was urgent. You are close. Get up. I'm trying. Claire's voice was fading. She managed to get to her knees. The outpost was so close. Maybe 200 meters. She could see the doors. She could see the Corinthians watching. She crawled forward. It was undignified. It was desperate. But she crawled. She pulled herself and the child she carried across the ice, meter by meter. Her vision was getting blurry. The cold was winning. 50 meters. 20. 10. Claire collapsed just outside the outpost entrance. She had nothing left. Her body had given everything it had. She felt hands grabbing her, pulling her inside. Voices speaking in Corinthian, urgent and confused. The last thing she heard before consciousness faded was Commander Thalera's voice. Save them both. Claire woke up in the human medical facility 3 days later. Her body ached everywhere, and her fingers and toes burned with the pain of recovering frostbite. But she was alive. The medical staff told her she had come within minutes of dying from hypothermia. Her core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. Another few minutes outside and she would not have made it. The first thing she asked about was the Corinthian child. He survived. The doctor smiled. We got word from their outpost. He's recovering in their medical wing. You saved his life. Claire closed her eyes and felt relief wash over her. It had been worth it. All the pain, all the risk, all the cold. She had saved him. She had not stood by and done nothing this time. There's something else. The doctor's expression changed. Your supervisor filed a report. You're being reviewed for violation of diplomatic protocols and unauthorized use of company equipment. There might be a hearing. Claire nodded. She had expected this. Okay. Was it worth it? Yes. Across the frozen expanse in the Corinthian medical facility, Val opened his eyes to find his mother sitting beside his bed. It was unusual. Corinthian parents did not typically maintain vigil over injured offspring. Recovery was a solitary process, a time to reflect on mistakes and build strength. But Thalera had not left his side since he had been brought in. Mother. His voice was weak. I failed. You survived. Thalera's response was automatic, the proper Corinthian answer. But even as she said it, she heard how hollow it sounded. How insufficient. I took the ship without authorization. I crashed in the storm. I needed an alien to save me. Carval's scales had begun to regain their color, but his eyes were filled with shame. I am weak. Thalera started to give the expected response. Started to tell him that weakness was unacceptable, that he must learn from his failure, that strength came from never needing help. But the words would not come. Instead, she saw Claire crawling across the ice, her body failing, refusing to give up. She heard the human's voice speaking about her lost son, about not being able to stand by again. That human risked her life for you. Thalera said quietly. She nearly died saving a stranger's child. I know. I do not understand why. Neither do I. But I think we should try to understand. Before Val could respond, the door to the medical facility opened. 3 senior Corinthian officers entered, their scales bearing the dark patterns of high command. Thalera stood immediately, her body going rigid. She had known they would come. She had violated too many protocols. There would be consequences. Commander Thalera. The lead officer's voice was cold and formal. We must speak. Alone. Thalera followed them to a private chamber. The door sealed behind them with a hiss. The 3 officers arranged themselves in a semicircle, their posture aggressive. This was not going to be a pleasant conversation. You contacted an alien directly during an emergency. The lead officer began without preamble. You provided classified ship schematics to a human. You allowed your personal feelings to compromise operational security. My offspring was dying. Many offspring die. That is the nature of existence. The weak perish. The strong survive. This is our way. Thalera's claws flexed. A child's life was saved. By an alien. Do you understand what message this sends? Another officer stepped forward. It tells the galaxy that Corinthians are weak. That we cannot save our own. That we need humans to rescue us. The High Command is deeply concerned about the diplomatic implications. The human acted on her own. Her superiors did not authorize the rescue. That makes it worse, not better. It means a single human felt so confident in our inadequacy that she took it upon herself to intervene. The lead officer's eyes narrowed. Your offspring must be disciplined for his actions. Severely. He took an unauthorized vessel. He crashed due to poor judgment. He required alien assistance to survive. Each of these is a serious offense. Thalera felt something hot and terrible building in her chest. He is a juvenile. He made a mistake. Mistakes have consequences. You know this. You have always known this. Why are you resisting now? Why was she resisting? A week ago she would have agreed with everything they said. She would have disciplined Val herself harshly, to prove that Corinthian values remained intact. She would have filed a formal complaint about human interference. She would have done everything correctly according to her culture's standards. But that was before she had listened to Claire Morton crawl across the ice, dying, refusing to quit. That was before she had heard a mother speak about losing her child and being unable to stand by again. That was before she had felt this strange, powerful emotion that she still did not have a proper name for. The human nearly died saving my offspring, Thalara said slowly. She gained nothing from this action. No profit. No strategic advantage. She risked everything for a stranger's child. Exactly. It was illogical. Emotional. Weak. The lead officer's tone was dismissive. Humans allow their feelings to override proper judgment. This is why they will never achieve true strength as a species. Is it weak? Thalara asked. The question hung in the air. Or is it something we have trained ourselves not to see? The three officers stared at her. This was dangerous territory. Questioning fundamental Corinthian values was not done, especially by senior commanders. You are emotionally compromised, the lead officer declared. You will discipline your offspring as required. You will file a formal statement distancing yourself from the human's actions. You will reinforce proper Corinthian values. This is not a request, Commander. This is an order. They left her alone in the chamber. Thalara stood motionless, her mind racing. Everything in her training told her to obey, to maintain discipline, to uphold the values she had lived by for decades. Emotion was weakness. Compassion was a flaw. The strong needed no one. But she kept seeing Claire in the storm, crawling with the last of her strength. She kept hearing that human voice saying nobody should have to watch their child die when someone could help. Thalara walked slowly back to the medical facility. Caraval was awake, watching her approach with fearful eyes. He knew what was coming. He had heard the senior officers arrive. He knew what they would have ordered. She sat down beside his bed. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Tell me what you remember about the human who saved you. Caraval blinked in surprise. I was mostly unconscious, but I remember her voice. She kept talking to me. She said she would not let me die. She said my mother loved me. He paused. Do you love me? The question struck Thalara like a physical blow. In Corinthian culture, such questions were not asked. Love was not discussed. It was not even acknowledged as a real concept, just a chemical reaction that served biological purposes. But looking at her son, remembering the terror she had felt watching his ship fall, remembering the desperate relief when Claire brought him back alive, Thalara knew the answer. Yes. The word came out rough, unfamiliar. Yes, I do. Caraval's eyes widened. No Corinthian parent had ever said such a thing to him. He did not know how to respond. The High Command wants me to punish you severely, Thalara continued. They want me to reinforce that what happened was shameful. That needing help is weakness. That the human's actions were an insult to our species. I understand. But I do not think that is the lesson you need to learn. Thalara stood and walked to the window. Outside, the ice plain stretched endlessly. That human taught me something. She showed me there is strength in caring for others. In refusing to stand by when someone needs help. In risking everything for a stranger. The High Command will not accept this view. No, they will not. Thalara turned back to her son. I must decide what is more important. Following our culture's rules, or following what I now know to be right. The joint assembly was unprecedented. Never before had the Corinthian outpost and human colony gathered together in one location for an official meeting. But Commander Thalara had requested it, and both sides were too curious to refuse. The meeting hall was filled with tension. Corinthians stood on one side, humans on the other, with a clear space between them. Claire sat in the front row of the human section, still recovering from her ordeal. Her fingers were bandaged from frostbite. She had been told that morning that the company was considering termination for her protocol violations. She did not care. The child was alive. That was all that mattered. The Corinthian High Command officials sat in positions of honor, their dark scales gleaming under the lights. They looked displeased. Claire could guess why. She had created a diplomatic problem by interfering. Now everyone had to deal with the consequences. Commander Thalara entered last. She walked to the center of the space between the two groups and stood there alone. Her posture was rigid, formal, perfect by Corinthian standards. But there was something different in her eyes. I have called this assembly to address the incident that occurred 6 days ago. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. A Corinthian vessel crashed during an ion storm. The pilot, my offspring Caraval, was trapped and dying. Our rescue capabilities were insufficient due to the electromagnetic interference. The Corinthian officials nodded. This was the expected opening. They were waiting for her to condemn the human interference, to reassert Corinthian independence and strength. A human engineer, Claire Morton, violated her colony's protocols to attempt a rescue. Thalera continued. She entered the storm alone, breached the crashed vessel, and extracted my offspring. She nearly died in the process. Claire shifted uncomfortably. She did not like being the center of attention. She had just done what needed to be done. The High Command has informed me that this action is viewed as an insult to Corinthian capability. Thalera's voice remained steady. That accepting such help displays weakness. That I should discipline my offspring for requiring alien assistance. Here it comes, Claire thought. The formal rejection. The reassertion of Corinthian pride. She understood. Cultures had their ways. At least the kid was alive. But Thalera did not say what everyone expected. I disagree with the High Command. The room erupted in noise. Corinthians hissed in shock. Humans murmured in surprise. The High Command officials rose from their seats, their postures aggressive. This was not acceptable behavior. This was not how things were done. Thalera raised her hand for silence. Gradually the room quieted. For generations we Corinthians have taught that emotion is weakness. That compassion is a flaw. That needing help is shameful. We have built our entire culture on the principle that the strong survive alone. She paused, looking directly at the High Command officials. But I watched a human nearly die to save my child. She gained nothing from this. She risked everything. And when I asked her why, she told me about her own lost son. She told me she could not stand by and do nothing. Claire felt tears building in her eyes. She had not expected this. That is not weakness. Thalera's voice grew stronger. That is a kind of strength we have forgotten. Claire Morton showed me that true strength includes protecting the vulnerable. Recognizing courage in others. Being willing to help even when it costs you everything. The lead High Command official stepped forward. Commander, you are emotionally compromised. These are human values, not Corinthian values. Perhaps we need to learn from human values. Thalera turned to face him directly. Our way has made us strong in some areas. But it has made us blind in others. We cannot even tell our own offspring that we love them. We punish those who need help instead of celebrating those who give it. Is that truly strength? Or is it just fear? This is unacceptable. Another official spoke up. You will be relieved of command. Perhaps. But before you do that, let me finish. Thalera turned to Claire. Claire Morton, please stand. Claire stood awkwardly, unsure what was happening. Thalera walked over to her and stopped directly in front of her. Then, to everyone's shock, the Corinthian commander lowered her head in a gesture of respect. You saved my son's life. You risked everything for a stranger. You showed me what compassion truly means. Thalera's voice was thick with emotion she no longer tried to hide. Thank you. From the depths of my being, thank you. Claire did not know what to say. She had not done it for thanks. She had done it because it was right. But looking at this proud alien warrior struggling to express gratitude, struggling to break free of a lifetime of training, Claire understood the courage it took. You're welcome. Claire said simply. How is KR Val? He is recovering well. He asks about you often. He wants to meet you properly. I'd like that. Thalera turned back to address the entire assembly. I am proposing a cultural exchange program. Let our young learn from each other. Let them see that strength comes in many forms. Let them understand that compassion and courage are not weaknesses but different expressions of power. The High Command officials were conferring among themselves in rapid Corinthian. The human colony administrators looked equally uncertain. This was not a small request. This was asking both cultures to examine their fundamental values. Furthermore, Thalera continued, I will not punish my offspring for requiring help. Instead, I commend his survival instincts and his ability to accept assistance when needed. These are valuable traits, not shameful ones. The lead official stepped forward again. Commander Thalera, you have violated numerous protocols. You have questioned fundamental values. You have. She has shown courage. A new voice spoke up. Carval entered the hall, still weak but walking on his own. He moved to stand beside his mother. The human could have let me die. She had no reason to save me. But she did. And my mother had the strength to see that as heroic, not insulting. Other young Corinthians began to murmur. Some of them nodded. The older generation might resist, but the young ones were listening. One of the human administrators stood. The colony supports this proposal. We believe cultural exchange could benefit both our peoples. More humans voiced agreement. The tide was shifting. What had seemed like a diplomatic disaster was becoming an opportunity. The High Command officials realized they were losing control of the narrative. They could relieve Thalera of command, but it would not change what had happened. It would not erase the fact that a human had shown remarkable courage, and that people from both species had witnessed it. We will consider this proposal, the lead official said stiffly. But there will be conditions. I welcome those discussions, Thalaera replied. 3 months later the ice storms came again to Glacius 7. But this time the response was different. When the emergency alert sounded, teams from both the Corinthian outpost and human colony mobilized together. They had spent weeks training, learning each other's equipment, understanding each other's strengths. Commander Thalaera coordinated from the command center. Beside her stood Claire Morton, now officially designated as a liaison between the two colonies. Together they watched the screens as mixed teams moved through the storm, rescuing a Corinthian survey team that had been caught by the weather. Your people are performing well, Thalaera noted. So are yours. Claire smiled. Turns out we're stronger together. Val entered the command center, now training as a junior officer. He had become something of a celebrity among both species, a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. He split his time between the Corinthian and human facilities, learning from both cultures. The rescue is complete, he reported. All personnel recovered safely. 0 casualties. Thalaera felt something she was still learning to recognize and accept. Pride mixed with affection. Love for her son. Gratitude for the human who had saved him. Hope for a future where both species could learn from each other. Good work, she said. Then, because she was still learning, she added, I am proud of you. Carval's eyes widened slightly, but he smiled. Thank you, Mother. Claire watched the exchange and felt warmth in her chest. She had not saved just one life that day in the storm. She had opened a door between worlds. She had shown that compassion was not weakness but a bridge that could connect even the most different of species. Outside the storm raged on. But inside, Corinthians and humans worked together, learning from each other, building something new. The cold would always be there. The dangers would always exist. But they would face them together now, stronger for their differences, united by the simple truth that caring for others was the greatest strength of all. The bridge between their worlds had been built by one human's refusal to stand by and do nothing. And it would stand for generations to come.